My dear listeners, this is an original sci-fi story I wrote for you. If you'd like to support me, just subscribe to the channel. It really helps the growth. The cub came in at 3 p.m. and Danny almost shot it. Not out of malice. Out of reflex. 2 years on contested border postings had rewired her nervous system to treat anything moving through the perimeter wire at that hour as a threat. She had her sidearm halfway out of the holster before her brain caught up with her hands and registered what she was actually seeing. Not an infiltrator. Not a soldier from either the Kethurn Collective or the Sarin Republic, whose disagreement over mineral rights had turned 3 moons of a mid-tier planet into a prolonged, grinding argument conducted mostly in artillery. A cub. A predator cub. It was large enough to be alarming. Juveniles of the species reached human shoulder height before they were considered old enough to be left unsupervised. But everything else about it was wrong for a threat. It was moving badly, one shoulder dropped, gait stuttering. Its bioluminescent markings, which on adults pulsed in controlled, readable patterns, were going haywire, flaring, stuttering, going dark, flaring again. It made it through the wire and then simply stopped, as though it had used the last of something getting that far. Danny stood very still. Then she put the sidearm away. Sergeant. That was Privik, her unit's signals operator, appearing at her shoulder. That's a predator cub. Yes. What's it doing in our perimeter? Dying at a guess. Danny was already moving. The cub's core temperature was catastrophic. Danny's scanner, calibrated for human norms, simply returned an error on the first read, which told her everything she needed to know. She treated Vracthi-adjacent physiology twice in her career, read extensively on predator biology because she made it her business to know what she might encounter, and knew that what was readable on the scanner face as invalid data probably translated to a fever that, in a human patient, would have caused irreversible neurological damage 3 hours ago. "We need to call it in," said Lieutenant Farrows, standing in the treatment bay doorway with his arms crossed. "Regs are clear. Non-combatant alien juvenile, contested zone. We log it and transfer it to the nearest species-appropriate authority. Nearest species-appropriate authority is the Predator Clan post at Kethurn Station. 3 days away. Then we log it and hold it." Danny looked at the cub. It was lying on its side on the treatment mat, which was not remotely large enough for it. Its legs extended well past the edge. Its markings had slowed their frantic cycling and were now doing something worse, going progressively dimmer. Its 4 amber eyes were open but tracking nothing. "Farrows," she said. "It won't survive 2 days. That's not our." "I am not," Danny said, with a precision that had taken her years to develop, the exact tone that communicated "I am being very calm and this is your only warning. Going to let a patient die of paperwork." Farrows was quiet for a moment. He was not a bad officer. He was an officer who had learned that rules existed for reasons, which was mostly correct, and had not yet fully learned to identify the exceptions, which was his current limitation. "It's not a human patient, Sergeant. It's a patient," she said, and turned back to the cub. The fever had a cause. She found it in the 2nd hour. A wound on the inner foreleg, partially hidden by the armor plating that was still soft and translucent in the way of juveniles. Something had pierced it, probably shrapnel from the ongoing artillery exchange to the east. The wound itself was not severe. The infection was. Predator biochemistry ran hot under normal circumstances. Their immune response was aggressive, almost violent, which was why they healed quickly, and why, when something got past those defenses, it tended to escalate fast. Whatever had entered the wound alongside the shrapnel had provoked a response the cub's body was currently losing. Danny worked with what she had, which was a field kit calibrated for humans and a working knowledge of xenobiology that was, at this moment, being tested comprehensively. The broad-spectrum antimicrobials from her kit were a gamble. Cross-species compatibility was never guaranteed, but she had documentation, had cross-referenced, had done the calculation twice. She administered a reduced dose. Then she sat down to watch. The cub was conscious enough to be frightened. That was the hardest part. If it had been fully delirious, she could have simply worked. Instead, it was cycling between lucidity and confusion, and in the lucid moments, it was aware that it was trapped in an unfamiliar space with an unfamiliar creature doing unfamiliar things to its body, and it wanted to leave. The first time it tried to stand, Danny put both hands on its shoulder and said, firmly and quietly, "No, Lie down. It did not understand her words. It understood her hands and her tone. She felt the muscle beneath her palms coil, felt the beginning of a push that could have sent her across the room without any particular effort on its part. And then something shifted and it went back down. She did not release her hands immediately. She kept them there, steady, and talked. It didn't matter what she said. She talked about the weather back home, about her mother's cooking, about the particular way light hit the water in the harbor near where she grew up. The cub's markings slowed their agitated cycling and settled into something low and dim. Its breathing evened fractionally. It tried to leave 3 more times over the next 8 hours. Each time, Danny stopped it. Not forcefully. She was not under any illusion about her ability to physically restrain a predator cub against its genuine intent, but with consistent, calm, unyielding presence. Each time, she put her hands on it and talked and did not move. Each time, after a moment that felt longer than it was, the cub went back down. By hour 12, it stopped trying. The fever broke in the early morning of the second day. Danny was dozing in the chair she'd pulled to the side of the treatment mat when she felt the change. A shift in the breathing that was different from the labored cycling of the past 30 hours. Slower. Deeper. She was awake instantly, scanner in hand. The temperature reading was still elevated, but for the first time in the valid range. Still high. No longer fatal. She let out a breath that she felt in her entire spine. The cub's eyes opened. All 4, clear and focusing in a way they hadn't been since it arrived. It was still for a moment, rebuilding its understanding of where it was and what had happened. Then it looked at Danny. She was aware very acutely of her own stillness. She did not move quickly. She did not reach for it. She set the scanner down on the floor and held up both hands, open, fingers spread. A gesture that meant nothing in predator culture specifically. But empty hands were empty hands. She'd always believed that translated. The cub looked at her hands for a long moment. Then it reached out one foreleg carefully, with a deliberateness that was somehow formal, and touched the tip of one claw to her palm. Light contact. A point of pressure that lasted 2 seconds and then withdrew. Danny did not know exactly what it meant. She knew what it felt like something being decided. She sent the retrieval request that afternoon. Pharaoh signed off without comment, which was its own kind of acknowledgement. The Predator clan ship would arrive within 36 hours. The cub spent most of those hours sleeping, which was the correct thing to do, and some of them watching Danny work, tracking her as she moved through the treatment bay, cataloging her in that still, total attention way that she had decided was simply how a species built for hunting learned anything new. She let it watch. She narrated what she was doing in a low, even voice, not for comprehension but for the sound. When the clan ship docked and 3 adults came through the bay door, enormous, armored markings cycling in patterns that made every human in the room take an instinctive step backward, the cub rose from the mat and crossed to them steadily, its gait nearly even, its own markings moving for the first time in a pattern that Danny's cultural briefing documents described as restoration of status, returned from hardship. One adult examined the cub thoroughly. Then it turned to Danny. She held up both hands again. Open. The same gesture. The adult looked at her for a long moment. Its markings shifted through several patterns. Then it inclined its head, a slow, deliberate movement, and held the position for 3 full seconds before raising it again. Danny returned the gesture. She filed her medical report that evening. Under outcome, she wrote, patient survived. Antimicrobial intervention successful. No complications. Under notes, she added, after a pause, species of patient, predator juvenile, undesignated clan affiliation. Prognosis on arrival, poor. Prognosis at transfer, stable. All standard protocols observed. She paused again, then added a final line. Patient responded well to treatment. No aggressive incidents. She closed the report, made a cup of terrible instant coffee from the field ration supplies, and sat with the warmth of the cup in both hands, watching the stars through the small scratched porthole above the treatment bay. Outside, the guns had been quiet for nearly 2 days. She didn't know if that was coincidence. She decided, for tonight, not to check.